if you look at the most modern Russian tank, which frankly isn't doing very well, and they haven't actually fielded much in Ukraine, the general principle of listening and now acceding to the Ukrainians' pleas to send them offensive equipment, I believe is absolutely right. I know this is Times Radio, and I shouldn't really say this, but I had an article in the Telegraph this morning making the case to say we really must do this. I mean, what the West has done so far has provided training and equipment and ammunition to Ukraine so that the Ukrainians will not lose the war. But frankly, we now need to help them to win it. I mean, I don't know what your take on it is, but my very clear take is that negotiation is not the way to end this war. You can't actually, at this stage, imagine an opening position for Zelensky, and you can't imagine an opening position for Putin. So, as far as I can see, the culmination of this conflict is going to be determined on the battlefield. And if that is correct, then we in the West must provide the Ukrainians with the offensive means to decisively strike the Russian army in the field and defeat them.
Now, I read that that we are contemplating sending 10 tanks, 10 Challenger 2s, presumably. It's not a vastly powerful force. So is the value in this in the symbolism of helping Ukraine go on the front foot, go on the offensive?
I don't think there's any value in symbolism. We need substance. The situation at the present moment is the French have agreed to send some AMX-10 light tanks. Okay, that's fairly useful, but it's a wheeled thing. It's not actually very significant. The Americans are going to send 50, I think that's the right number, of Bradley infantry fighting vehicles. That's a good step in the right direction. The Germans are contemplating sending some of their Marder armoured personnel carriers and thinking about Leopard 2 tanks. We, the British, really ought to be thinking about Challenger 2 tanks and also the Warrior infantry fighting vehicle. The latter has been the mainstay of the British infantry for the last 20 years through the two Gulf Wars and also the conflict in the Balkans. But it's been decided it's too expensive to upgrade it. So our Warrior fleet is going to be retired. Well, frankly, before we scrap it, let's make a number of these really useful infantry fighting vehicles available to the Ukrainians. Symbolism is no good.
Yeah.
Substance is what is needed to help them have an offensive capability so they can strike the Russians decisively.
Now tell me then, does the British Army have the armour, the tanks and the armour to spare? I think this is one of your concerns, isn't it? And before the Ukraine war ever broke out, there was a pretty lively argument about the level of armoured equipment available to British forces.
No, you're absolutely right, John. We don't have the armour available. We're only planning to upgrade just over 130 of our Challenger 2 tanks into Challenger 3 tanks. We are retiring our infantry fighting vehicle fleet in toto and replacing them with a wholly inadequate wheeled replacement. No, we the British don't have programs for a sufficient amount of armoured fighting vehicles. But the harsh reality is that the war that's being fought now is the war in Ukraine. Of course, we want the Ukrainians to win it, but in many ways, they're fighting for us and our values against the threat to not just Ukraine, but a much more wide threat from Russia across Europe. So let's back those who are fighting Russia at the present moment with whatever equipment we've got, while at the same time properly financing our British, our UK land forces. There's a lot of work for the government to do here, and it's not going to come cheap.
Yeah, and I wonder
being pusillanimous about Ukraine is not going to get us forward.
Right, and from a wider NATO perspective, I wonder, has the Ukraine war vindicated the argument for tank warfare, which was something of an argument not so long ago, wasn't it?
Well, it was an argument by those who chose to criticize the tank without really looking into the detail of it. The history of warfare is a history of invention and counter-invention. And there were those a few years ago saying that drones were now making the tank obsolete. Well, up to a point, if you freeze the frame, that could be right. But the history of warfare is about invention and counter-invention. And therefore, if you look at the most modern Russian tank, which frankly isn't doing very well, and they haven't actually fielded much in Ukraine, but it does have an anti-drone and anti-aircraft capability. That's what we need to be developing and doing to make sure our main battle tanks are able to defend themselves from drones, because The harsh reality is that you can use technology, you can use artillery, you can use long-range means to influence a battlefield, but at the end of the day, it's soldiers on the ground that actually achieve success. And that means you've got to put those soldiers into tanks, into infantry fighting vehicles, and enable them to have the protection to go forward and close with the enemy. That is not going to change, even though technology is enabling other aspects of warfare. And that's one of the lessons that's very harshly coming out of the Ukraine war at the present moment.
Yeah,
High
yeah.
technology, satellite systems and the like, HIMARS, long-range artillery, absolutely critical. But you can't get away from the down and dirty fighting between soldiers that at the end of the day is what decides the battle.
Right. It's always good to get your thoughts on Ukraine. Richard, while you're here, I am interested to get your latest thoughts on Prince Harry. Had a certain amount of criticism, as you know, over the news in his memoir about his service in Afghanistan, in particular the fact that he killed 25 Taliban fighters. What do you make of that? I haven't read the book. I've seen a bit of the extract which includes this piece of news. He can't be said to be glorying in the killing of those Afghans, which would not be a tasteful thing to do. What are your thoughts? Was it just an inappropriate full stop?
John, I always like to be helpful, but I must have turned down 40 to 50 interview requests about Prince Harry. Your researchers didn't say they wanted to talk about Prince Harry today. I have made and I'm making no comment about the Prince Harry stuff. Sorry.
Well, my team, had no role in this. I just thought I'd get your view, and now you've given me.
It's always worth a try, but I'm afraid I have to be consistent on this one. I'm not talking about Prince Harry.